Hi, I'm Sharon from Standard Chartered. I've got a question more so referring to government policies. And as a CEO, would you agree that the government plays a major role in complementing your efforts in leading corporate responsibility? And if so, how would you be able to influence government policy?
Government policy, the role of government policy, and can corporates influence government policy? Well, surprisingly, that's do they?
This must be the G in GLC. Never mind. Well, the answer is yes, up to a point. Clearly, we as a major component of the business community, and obviously being government controlled or government owned or government linked, we do, but again, there should be limits, because otherwise we'll be capturing policy, which we shouldn't be doing. The answer is yes. I mean, the Silver Book officially comes under the Putrajaya Committee of GLCs. I should highlight there is a governance principle within all these initiatives, i.e. this is to give due recognition that these are listed companies mostly. They have boards. So whatever guidelines we issue, actually a board can actually come back and say this is not relevant for us. Because you have to appreciate a guideline that's trying to cover such a big space will necessarily be quite omnibus in nature, but at the same time, need to be relevant in terms of depth. And indeed it is, we think. But so it allows that. So indeed, social contribution, corporate responsibility. There's a detailed book, and it's not just a book. The books are all designed to be actionable and measurable. So you start with audit, for example. You got to do your audit by a certain date. After you've done your audit, what is your action plan? And you have to implement it by a certain date. After you do that, what do you do? You have to measure it and then make adjustment, and this is ongoing. The concept of it being a living document and so on. So that came through the good graces of a forum that was created by the government and done. I think. And this applies also to the Red Book and other books. So certainly, we have been at the forefront of that for our companies, and indeed the intention, if this and indeed there's been quite a lot of requests and collaboration with non-GLCs actually looking at this space, and we work with the Institute of Corporate Responsibility and other organizations. Thank you.
So so government does have a role to play, and corporates can and should influence government up to an extent. I think Malaysia, we find that the government is very much maligned government that we have here is actually quite open to engaging with business.
In fact, Dr. Johan, as you well know, I think SC, Securities Commission, Dr. Zarina in particular, has taken this up very strongly, if I'm correct. And Bursa, for example, by virtue of the reporting standards, for example, certainly has taken this up.
Now, I regard that as a good thing. The fact that we have the supporters are up there and sponsors and all that. The Securities Commission, Bursa Malaysia, SIDC, and Khazanah is not mentioned, but Khazanah is a big push here as well. And of course, behind it all, there's Ministry of Finance. Whenever there's a budget, there's some kind of corporate responsibility or CSR element to it. I regard that as a good thing. I do notice, though, that observers, particularly from overseas, somehow view this with a bit of suspicion. How do you feel about that, the fact that corporate responsibility is espoused by government? Would it be better if government said nothing and kind of we all just got on with it ourselves without any prod from government? How do you feel about that? And I know in the UK, government did play a role in kick-starting this whole movement, in fact.
I think it's vital. Again, it's all to do with this collaboration and taking your message from above you, if you like. It's a leadership thing. I was particularly struck, and it has stuck with me for many years, by a statement that one of our previous chairmen, Sir John Bond, made, and he said that we're in 83 countries now. It was 79 at the time, but we're in 83 countries, and we are guests in 82 of them. That actually puts a very heavy obligation on you to behave properly. It also means that you have to contribute. And I think that the government, it's quite correct that they should be in the lead. And for example, if Dato Peter Chin was here from the Ministry of Plantations and so on, he would be telling you that he is intensely involved in trying to do the right thing with the RSPO and in the world of timber and so on. So I think it's absolutely vital. But the role of the multinational, and I think this is very important as well, multinationals are now so big, some of them are so big, that they transcend national borders. And that brings with it a responsibility as well. And I believe that the responsibility that brings, for example, as a guest in Malaysia, and having been here 124 years as a guest, means that you have to give something back. And one of the things that you can give back is that you can bring best practices from other parts of the world on a very neutral basis, simply to say, elsewhere where perhaps they're further along this journey, these are the kinds of things that are happening. So yes, I think there's a role to play for government, but I think there's a role to play for companies as well, interrelating with government.
Right, thank you. Now, there's a gentleman there with a light colour shirt. Which I will be going there, to that gentleman there. Down here as well.
I'm Raji from Intel. I have two questions. First one is, what would you rate the level of awareness of CR in this country, as well as the practices, in comparison to other countries in the globe, especially in other regions? What are the key gaps that we have, and what we could do as the corporate social responsibility practitioners or CEOs, and what else could the government could do to propagate this value? The second part of the question is the question of affordability does exist. It's much easier for us to speak from the multinational perspective as well as some of the bigger companies, but the level of affordability is there for smaller industries, SMIs. Point to note is they will not be able to afford to ensure that the materials that they're using or the waste product that they are delivering back to the community are safe for the environment. Thanks.
I think it's very interesting just sitting here and listening to the questions and the dialogue that's been happening. The question earlier was whether government has a role and so on. And I think if you look at the fact that everyone has a role to play in all of this, and the realization as I sit here is that everyone is at a different level of evolution. And if you look at whether or not Malaysian companies are best practices and Malaysian CEOs are best practices in this CR space, I don't believe so, because if you look at the HSBCs of this world, if you look at the MNCs, they've had hundreds of years of evolution, and they're at a completely different level of the evolution of their organization, and they've actually achieved a level of maturity. So I believe where we are as Malaysia and within Malaysia, the Malaysian CEOs, is that the government has taken a role in actually raising this as an agenda, as a national agenda, and raising it as corporate responsibilities for all companies within Malaysia to start thinking about and to start pulling together cohesively and to pull together the efforts that they are already been doing in bits and pieces and raising the awareness and trying to say, let's put a framework around it. And then that in itself will start us benchmarking ourselves. That starts as benchmarking ourselves against the global best practices. And as Irene mentioned, the HSBCs of this world has a role to play as MNC within Malaysia, because they will set the tone again, and the spirit of collaboration where we as the local CEOs can learn from them, so that we don't have to go through the very painful learning curve. We can sort of leapfrog it and try to get to where they are in a much shorter time. So the answer is no, I don't believe that Malaysia is there yet. I believe everyone's aware of it now. I believe that everyone will be very conscious in pulling together and reflecting internally what it means for their individual corporations within this space. And I think that in itself is a really good realization already.